The night was merciless. Snow fell in jagged sheets, driven sideways by a wind that howled like the ghosts of the forgotten. Each gust bit into her skin, slicing through the torn cloak that clung to her shoulders. The Omega ran, though every step was agony. Her breath came in broken clouds, dissolving instantly into the storm, as if even the night itself wished to erase her existence. Branches whipped at her face, leaving angry welts along her cheeks. Ice-crusted roots clawed at her boots, trying to drag her down, as though the forest itself had chosen its side. Behind her, the sound came again, low, guttural, savage. Wolves. No, not just wolves. Trackers. Their snarls were too sharp, their growls too intelligent. They weren't hunting prey. They were hunting her. Her legs burned, muscles screaming with every stride, but she didn't slow. She couldn't. She had seen what happened when they caught one like her. She had smelled the blood, heard the silence after the screaming stopped. The storm was more than weather. It was a mirror. Every gust reminded her of rejection. Every crack of thunder echoed with the pack's voice telling her she didn't belong. The snow stung her skin the way whispered names had stung her heart. Cursed. Dangerous. Omega. Her lungs convulsed. She stumbled, catching herself on a tree slick with ice. Her palm stuck to the bark for an instant, flesh raw from the cold. She pressed her forehead against the wood, fighting the urge to collapse. But then came the sound again, closer this time. Branches snapping. Heavy paws pounding against the frozen earth. They were gaining. She shoved herself forward, half running, half lurching deeper into the trees. Blood smeared down her thigh from the gash above her knee, warm only for a second before freezing against her skin. She tasted iron in her mouth, not sure if it was from her bitten lip or the blood rushing too fast through her body. Her heart wasn't beating anymore. It was thrashing. Wild. Animal. A spark jolted through her hand. She froze mid-stride, staring at her own fingers. For just a breath, they glowed, silver fire, burning beneath her skin, licking at her nails like it wanted to break free. She clenched her fist, forcing it down. Not now. Not here. If anyone saw, they would know the truth. And if they knew, they would finish what they started years ago. The growls closed in, circling. She could hear them splitting, flanking her, driving her where they wanted her to go. Hurting her. She had seen this tactic before. A predator's patience was the cruelest weapon of all. Her chest tightened. She wasn't running toward freedom. She was running into their jaws. The trees opened without warning, spitting her into a clearing smothered in fog. The ground was uneven, a graveyard of black stone jutting from beneath the snow like broken bones. The air reeked of sulfur and something older, something watching. She staggered into the center, spinning, searching for any path out. The fog swallowed the edges of the clearing hole. There was no exit. Her knees buckled. She fell against one of the stones, clutching it like a lifeline. The cold bled through her skin, seeping into her bones until even her soul shivered. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. But what good would it do? The night did not care. The storm would only eat her voice. A shadow moved at the edge of the fog. Her breath hitched. She held still, every instinct screaming. The trackers, they had finally cornered her. Another shape emerged behind it. Then another. Yellow eyes glowed in the mist, one pair, then three, then six, circling like torches in the dark. They were here. Her hand trembled as it slid across the stone. She could feel the flame fighting inside her again, scratching at the surface of her skin, begging to be released. Her vision blurred as heat swelled in her chest, fighting the frost. The ground beneath her palm quivered, or maybe it was her own body breaking. She wanted to give in. Just once. To let the silver fire tear through her and take them all with it. But she couldn't. Not yet. Because once the fire rose, there would be no stopping it. Not until everything, them, her, the forest itself, was ash. Her lips parted in a shuddering breath. The fog thickened. The wolf stepped closer. And then, silence. No growls. No breath. No sound but the storm. The air shifted, heavy, electric. She knew that feeling. It was the moment the world itself seemed to bow, the instant before lightning struck. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her pulse thudded once, twice, like a drum. She wasn't alone. There was something else here. Someone. Her gaze fixed on the shadows beyond the wolves. A darker figure moved there, taller, heavier, exuding power so tangible it pressed against her chest like a hand. The wolves stopped, ears flattening, bodies lowering. Not in fear. In submission. The figure stepped closer, and for the first time that night, the Omega felt something she hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope. But hope was dangerous. She pressed her back against the stone, eyes wide, blood pounding in her ears. She couldn't trust it. She couldn't trust anyone. And yet, something in her bones whispered that this arrival wasn't accident. It was fate. The storm raged. Her wounds bled. Her secret burned inside her. And as she stared into the fog, she knew her life had just changed forever. If this opening gripped your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the Alpha's Romance Library, where every tale burns brighter than the last. The fog parted as though something unseen commanded it. The snow, once a wild flurry, slowed in midair, each flake drifting heavier, softer, as if the storm itself bowed to a presence it could not defy. Out of the haze, a figure moved. Tall. Unhurried. His steps broke no branch, crushed no snow. It was as though the earth itself shifted for him, clearing his path, bending to his weight and his will. The wolves that had circled her only moments ago lowered themselves instinctively, tails pressed between their legs, ears flat against their skulls. They growled still, but the sound was different now, uncertain, restrained, afraid. Their yellow eyes darted from her trembling form to the man emerging through the fog, and for the first time, they hesitated. Her breath caught. She couldn't move. Her body wanted to collapse against the stone, to surrender to exhaustion, but something about the presence in front of her rooted her upright. Fear should have consumed her. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something dangerous. The man was cloaked in black, his shoulders broad beneath the fur-lined mantle, the hood shadowing his face. Yet even shrouded, his aura bled into the clearing. Authority. Power. The kind that did not need to be spoken, because it already commanded every breath around him. He stopped just beyond the first row of wolves, his posture loose but lethal, the way predators moved when they knew they didn't need to fight to win. The storm seemed to pause, caught between breaths. Then, he lifted his head. And she saw his eyes. Not yellow like the wolves. Not gold like the alphas of her old pack. His were darker, molten amber, simmering like a fire smothered under ash. They locked on her, cutting through fog and fear and every wall she had built around herself. It was not just a glance. It was recognition. Her lips parted, though no sound came out. He spoke her name. Softly. Deliberately. As if he had been holding it on his tongue, waiting for the exact moment to let it fall. Her chest tightened, pain and confusion colliding. He shouldn't know it. No one should. She had erased herself from the world the night she fled, burying that name as deeply as the ashes of her childhood den. And yet, here it was, carried back to her in the voice of a stranger. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it wanted to escape. She pressed herself harder against the stone, as though it could anchor her to this moment. The wolves snarled again, torn between instinct and command. One lunged forward, teeth flashing. The figure did not move. Instead, his voice shifted, dropping low, sharp as steel. It wasn't a shout. It didn't need to be. The sound vibrated through the clearing, a warning buried in every syllable. The wolf froze mid-step, whimpering, tail tucking tighter, before slinking back into the fog. The others followed. One by one, the circle dissolved. Paws scraped the snow as they retreated, their hunger no match for the dominance that now filled the air. Within heartbeats, the growls faded, swallowed by the storm. She was alone again. No. Not alone. Her gaze snapped back to him. The hood slipped as he stepped closer, revealing a face cut in sharp lines, shadowed by a darkness that felt both familiar and foreign. Scars traced his jaw, old but unhidden, each one a story carved into flesh. His mouth was set in a line neither kind nor cruel, but something in between. His eyes, those molten embers, never left hers. Her chest rose and fell in ragged rhythm. She wanted to demand answers, but her throat locked. Fear twisted with something she refused to name, a pull that made her want to lean forward even as her instincts screamed to flee. He closed the distance slowly, giving her time to react. To run. To fight. She did neither. Her legs refused her commands. When he stopped, only a few feet separated them. He looked down at her, and for an instant, something flickered in his gaze. Not pity. Not sympathy. Something sharper. Recognition, again. As though he had been expecting her. The silence was unbearable. Finally, she forced her voice out, hoarse and broken. Why? It wasn't a question. It was a plea. 1,000 unspoken fears twisted into one word. His answer came without hesitation. Because you don't yet know what you are. The words fell heavy between them, colder than the snow, hotter than the fire in her chest. Her pulse surged. The silver flame inside her, the one she fought to bury, clawed against her ribs as if those words had given it permission to rise. She clenched her fists, digging nails into her palms until she felt blood bead against her skin. What I am, she whispered, is a mistake. Something shifted in his expression. A shadow passed over his face, not anger, not shock, but something rawer, hidden deep. Without warning, he crouched, closing the last breath of space between them. His hand lifted, hovering inches from her wound. She tensed, every muscle braced to strike if he dared touch her. He didn't ask permission. His palm pressed against her thigh, over the torn flesh. The pain flared white-hot, ripping a cry from her throat. Then came warmth. Not gentle warmth. Scalding. His touch seared her like iron dragged across snow. She gasped, body arching, torn between pulling away and clinging to the fire. Her blood sizzled beneath his hand. The wound knit, muscle and skin pulling together, leaving only a pale scar where the gash had been. When he lifted his palm, steam rose faintly from her skin. She stared at the mark, breath shuddering, chest heaving. The pain was gone. But in its place lingered something far worse. She wanted more. Her eyes dragged back to his face, searching for explanation, for mercy, for anything that could make sense of what had just happened. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The weight of his silence pressed against her as heavily as his hand had. She wanted to demand answers, to spit fury, to demand why he thought he could touch her, heal her, burn her all at once. But the words died on her tongue. Because deep down, in a place she didn't dare acknowledge, she already knew. This was no stranger. This was the Alpha King. And for reasons she couldn't begin to understand, he had just chosen her. The Alpha King's hand lingered in the air after leaving her wound sealed, as though the heat of his touch still burned between them. She shifted away, pressing her back against the frozen stone. Every instinct screamed at her to distrust him, yet her body betrayed her, drawn toward the heat that had already stitched her flesh back together. Her breath shook. Her voice, when it returned, was little more than a rasp. You don't know me. But the lie fractured as soon as it left her lips, because in his eyes, she saw the truth. He did know her. Somehow. The storm muffled around them, but inside her mind, the silence cracked open like an old wound. Memory surged, unwanted, unstoppable. She was small again. Bare feet pressing into the cold dirt of the den, her hair tangled, her body trembling as the pack encircled her. Their faces blurred with rage and disgust, every whisper striking harder than claws. Cursed. Wrong. Dangerous. She remembered the way their eyes avoided hers, as though to look at her too long was to risk being tainted. Even her mother had turned away, hands covering her face. Her father's jaw clenched, but his silence was worse than any word. She had begged then. Begged for someone to hold her, to say she belonged. But the only arms that reached for her were the ones dragging her outside. Exile was not a single act. It was a lifetime stretched into a moment, the final tearing of a bond that could never be mended. Her eyes snapped open, dragging her back into the present. The Alpha King was still watching her, his gaze unflinching, as though he had seen the memory himself. She hated that. Hated the way his silence pulled the truth from her without a word. She turned her face away, clutching her knees to her chest, the scar on her thigh still stinging faintly with heat. "You think you know," she whispered, voice bitter, "but you don't. You don't know what I've done." The first shift. She had been barely more than a child when it tore through her. Her body convulsed, her bones cracking into unfamiliar shapes, skin searing as though the fire inside her had finally escaped. Most wolves shifted for the first time, surrounded by pack, celebrated, welcomed into the circle of their kind. But not her. Her shift had been in secret. In the middle of the night. Alone. And when the pain ended, when she stood shaking and naked under the moon, silver fire had burst from her skin. It had licked the walls of the den, hungry, alive, merciless. The straw bedding caught first. Then the wood. Then the flesh of those who had come running, too slow to stop it. By the time she had crawled out, the den was ash. The smell of burning hair and flesh clung to her skin for days. No matter how hard she scrubbed in the river, it would not leave. She had never been forgiven. She had never forgiven herself. The memory pressed against her throat like a blade. Her nails dug into her knees, hard enough to bruise. She wanted to hide it, to lock it back in the dark where it belonged. But his eyes, those relentless eyes, wouldn't let her. Finally, the words tore out of her, raw, ragged. "I burned them." The air between them seemed to crack. She could almost hear the weight of her confession settle over the clearing. "I burned my own den," she whispered, shaking. "My family. My pack. Everyone who ever looked at me and saw something wrong. They were right. I am wrong. I don't need you to tell me what I am. I already know." Her chest convulsed. She forced herself to meet his gaze, waiting for the disgust, the condemnation, the rejection she had grown used to. But it didn't come. He didn't look away. Didn't recoil. His expression didn't soften, but neither did it harden. He simply stared at her, as if her words were not new to him. As if he had already known. That was worse. Her stomach twisted. Her voice cracked. "Why are you here?" Before he could answer, movement flickered at the edge of the clearing. She tensed, heart leaping, but it wasn't wolves. It was men. 5 of them, cloaked in the same dark furs, stepping out of the fog. His guards. Their eyes slid to her instantly, suspicion sharp in their narrowed gazes. One of them, broader than the rest, gripped the hilt of his blade. "My king," he said, voice low but edged. "Why do you stand with her?" Her pulse spiked. Her body folded in on itself, bracing for the inevitable. The guard's lip curled. "She's cursed. Everyone knows the fire is real. Let us finish this." The Alpha King did not move. His gaze never left her. "She's mine." The words were quiet. Dangerous. Final. The guards froze. The air shifted. None of them dared move again. But their eyes still burned into her, sharp with loathing. She could feel their hatred like claws against her skin. Her throat tightened. She hated them for it, but hated herself more for the way those words, "she's mine," had lit something in her chest she couldn't extinguish. The Alpha King finally turned his head, just enough to cut his guards with his gaze. "Leave." They hesitated. Then, one by one, they obeyed, disappearing back into the fog. But their suspicion lingered, heavy in the air they left behind. Silence again. Only the storm and her pulse. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The Alpha King crouched lower, his face level with hers, his voice softer now. "You think your fire cursed you," he said, steady, measured. "But what if it saved you?" Her chest constricted. She shook her head violently. "No. You don't understand. I killed them. I destroyed everything. I should have burned with them." His hand hovered in the space between them, not touching, but close enough for her to feel the warmth. "You survived." The words were simple. Heavy. She flinched as if struck. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Survival had never felt like victory. To her, it had always felt like punishment. But in his voice, survival sounded different. As though it meant something more. Her body trembled. She turned her face away, tears freezing against her skin. She wanted to hate him. To push him back into the fog and never see him again. But she couldn't. Because for the first time, someone wasn't looking at her like she was cursed. He was looking at her as though she was inevitable. The climb began in silence. The Alpha King moved ahead with steady, measured steps, his cloak dragging shadows across the snow. She followed, though her body screamed for rest. Each step drove splinters of ice deeper into her soles, each breath scraped like glass against her lungs. And still, she climbed. Because something about the way he walked, as though the mountain itself obeyed him, refused to let her falter. The world narrowed to stone and storm. The trees fell away, the path sharpening into jagged ledges. The air grew thinner, every inhale searing her throat. Her pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out thought, yet some instinct told her this was not just a mountain. This was something older, something alive. The first rune appeared in the rock like a wound. Faint at first, a curve of light half buried in frost. Then another. Then more, spilling across the cliff face like veins of silver. They pulsed faintly, alive beneath the stone, guiding their ascent. Her chest tightened. The glow reflected in her eyes, whispering to something buried deep in her blood. She had seen marks like these once before, in nightmares that had clawed her awake, drenched in sweat, heart pounding as though she had been running for her life. She gripped the stone harder, nails breaking against the ice. But the runes did not fade. They grew brighter. The Alpha King glanced back at her, and for a moment, his eyes glimmered with something she could not name. Not pity. Not triumph. Something older. As though he had seen this before. When they reached the ridge, the storm broke. The clouds parted, spilling moonlight across the peak in a flood of silver. And there it was, the altar. Carved into the mountain itself, it rose from the stone like the bones of a god. Runes wrapped around it in spirals, glowing brighter with each heartbeat she took. The air vibrated, heavy with a hum that pressed into her skin, her bones, her very breath. She froze at the edge of the plateau, trembling. The altar wasn't just ancient. It was waiting. The Alpha King stepped aside, his gaze never leaving her. "Go," he said, his voice carrying not as a command, but as something heavier. Her legs refused. Every instinct screamed that if she stepped forward, she would not return the same. But the pull was stronger than fear. It clawed at her chest, dragged her toward the altar like invisible hands. She staggered forward, each step weaker, yet unstoppable. The moment her palm touched the stone, the world changed. The runes erupted in light, flooding the mountain in blinding silver. The air convulsed. Her body lifted, weightless, suspended between earth and sky. Her eyes snapped open wide, but what she saw was not the mountain. It was memory. Not hers, older. Centuries older. A woman cloaked in fire stood in the same place, her hair whipping in the wind, her eyes burning silver. Pax knelt before her, torn between worship and fear. Her voice thundered, "The flame is not curse. It is choice. And choice is the sharpest blade of all." Another vision swallowed it. The same altar, drenched in blood. Wolves tore at each other's throats while fire consumed the sky. The woman screamed, her body fracturing into light, her power splitting into 1,000 sparks. A final whisper slithered through the vision, cold and eternal. "The child of fire will rise again. She will end us, or redeem us." Her body convulsed. She gasped, crashing back into her own skin. The light around her flickered, then settled into her chest, pulsing with her heartbeat. She fell to her knees, clutching the stone as if it could anchor her against the flood of voices still echoing in her skull. "End us or redeem us." The words wrapped around her throat, strangling. She wanted to scream, to deny it. But denial withered in her mouth, because she felt it. Felt the truth like a brand against her soul. The Alpha King's shadow fell across her. She lifted her head, and for the first time since meeting him, he wasn't watching her like a stranger. He was watching her like someone who had been waiting. Her lips trembled. What do you see?" He stepped closer, his cloak brushing the snow. For the first time, he lowered himself, not with the dominance of a king, but with the weight of something deeper. He bent a knee before her, his hand pressing to the frozen ground in silent acknowledgement. "I see what they feared," he said softly. "And what they prayed for." Her chest fractured. She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "I am not salvation. I am fire. I destroy." He met her gaze without flinching. "Then why are you still here?" The question pierced deeper than any blade. She had no answer. The voices whispered again, faint but undeniable. "Child of fire." Her hands burned against the stone. She pulled them back, staring in horror as silver sparks glowed faintly in her palms, dancing like embers desperate to ignite. "No," she whispered. "No, this is wrong." The Alpha King's hand hovered near hers, not touching, but close enough for her to feel his heat. "It is not wrong," he said. "It is yours." Her pulse stuttered. For a heartbeat, the world stilled, just him, the altar, and the fire in her blood. And for the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong all along. The mountain altar still hummed beneath her skin when the summons came. The winter gathering awaited. The Alpha King gave no explanation, only a command cloaked in silence. His guards returned, their gazes sharp with suspicion, their footsteps heavy with disapproval. She followed, though her pulse screamed against it. Each step down the mountain felt like descent into a pit she had already fled once in her life. By the time they reached the valley, the world had changed. Fires burned in great iron braziers, their flames clawing against the night sky. Packs gathered in the snowbound clearing, their cloaks heavy, their eyes hungrier than the wolves that prowled at their heels. The air was thick with breath and judgment. She felt it instantly, the shift of bodies, the tightening of stares. The murmur that rippled like poison through the crowd. Cursed. Why does he bring her here? Her kind should have burned with the last age. Each word was a dagger. Old wounds reopened in her chest, bleeding fresh. She wanted to turn back, to vanish into the storm. But the Alpha King walked forward without pause, and the space around him parted. No one blocked his path. No one dared. He led her to the circle of stones at the clearing's heart, the seat of judgment, the place where Pax came to settle law and blood. The rival alphas were already waiting. They rose as he approached, cloaked in wolf pelts, their shoulders broad, their eyes burning with the fury of men who believed their authority unquestionable. The eldest of them, his hair white as snow and his teeth bared in a sneer, spoke first. "You bring her here?" His voice carried like a whip across the crowd. "You dare break sacred ground with fireblood?" The crowd roared their agreement. Her skin prickled as dozens of eyes stabbed into her. The Alpha King said nothing. He stood beside her, his silence more commanding than any denial. But silence was not protection. Not here. Another Alpha stepped forward, younger but no less venomous. His gaze cut into her like claws. We've heard the whispers. We've seen the signs. Shadow wolves rise from the forests, our shrines defiled, our kin slain. And now you appear with her at your side? The crowd erupted again. She trembled, every muscle taut, the fire inside her clawing against its cage. She forced it down, nails biting into her palms. Not here. Not in front of them. If she let it loose, she would prove them right. Her breath shuddered as the accusations rained down. She burned her own den. She is death-given flesh. She will destroy us all. Her chest fractured. She wanted to scream that she hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted the fire that lived inside her. But the words turned to ash in her throat. They would not believe her. They never had. And then, the forest itself screamed. The shadow split. Wolves poured from the tree line, but not wolves of flesh. Their forms were smoke and claw, eyes glowing like coals, their bodies twisted beyond nature. Shadow wolves. The crowd scattered in chaos. Screams cut through the air. Teeth tore into flesh. Blood hit the snow in red bursts, steam rising as it pooled. She staggered back, the memory of fire flooding her vision. It was happening again. Destruction, chaos, all spiraling around her. The rival alphas turned instantly, their fury sharpening. It is her, one shouted, his voice slicing through panic. She brought them. The words ignited the crowd. Fingers pointed. Voices rose. She felt the tide of hatred surging, drowning her. She turned to the Alpha King, desperate, not for rescue, but for proof that she wasn't alone. That someone, anyone, still saw her as more than curse. But his face was unreadable. His jaw tight, his eyes locked not on her, but on the shadows. Then his council gathered close, their voices low but sharp. She caught fragments, enough to pierce deeper than any blade. She will destroy us. Every prophecy ends in fire. You must choose, my king. Her heart stopped. She waited, blood roaring in her ears, breath shallow with dread. The Alpha King's silence stretched. He did not push them back. He did not speak her name. And in that pause, in that hesitation, something inside her broke. The wolves crashed closer. She stumbled backward, snow crunching beneath her boots, her body trembling not from fear of death but from something worse, the realization that even he, the one who had knelt at the altar, could abandon her. The crowd's eyes blazed with hatred. The council's words sharpened like blades. And still, he hesitated. The silence was her answer. Her chest constricted. Her body straightened, though every part of her screamed. And in that moment, she carved the vow into her bones. I will never beg to belong again. Her breath steadied. Her eyes hardened. And without another word, she turned from him, from them all, and walked into the storm. The storm swallowed her as she walked away, but she did not care. Let the wind tear at her cloak. Let the snow blind her path. Better the silence of exile than the roar of their voices. Her legs carried her until her body failed. Blood leaked again from reopened wounds, painting the snow in a trail that betrayed her every step. The fire inside her pulsed, furious at being contained, but she forced it down. If she released it now, the forest itself would burn. And she refused to give them that satisfaction. When her strength finally broke, she collapsed at the mouth of a ruined cave. Its jagged stone teeth rose from the earth like the bones of some long-dead beast. She dragged herself inside, half crawling, half falling, until the dark embraced her. The air was damp, thick with the smell of moss and ash. Old fire pits scarred the stone, ghosts of lives long gone. She pressed her back against the wall, her body shaking, her blood dripping into the dirt. The silence pressed close, but it was not cruel. For once, silence felt like mercy. She tore strips from her cloak, binding the gash in her arm, her fingers clumsy from exhaustion. Her breath hitched with each movement, sharp bursts of pain escaping her lips. When the fire finally caught, it was weak, a flicker of stolen warmth from a few scraps of wood she had scavenged. The flames licked the air cautiously, as though afraid of her. She stared at them, mesmerized, her chest aching with memory. Fire had always been her enemy and her shadow. Yet here it was, small, fragile, offering comfort. Her eyes closed, heavy with exhaustion. And that was when she felt it, the shift in the air. The weight of presence. She opened her eyes slowly, and there he was. The Alpha King. He filled the cave's mouth like a shadow cut from stone. His cloak dripped with snow, his eyes burning even in the darkness. For a moment, neither moved. The firelight flickered between them, throwing his face into sharp relief. Her throat tightened. She wanted to snarl at him, to demand why he had followed. But the words would not come. Her voice trembled too much, her heart betraying her anger. He stepped inside, his movements measured, deliberate. His gaze dropped to the crude bandages at her arm, then rose back to her face. "You should have let me finish it," he said quietly. His voice was not a reprimand. It was softer. Almost regretful. She looked away, pressing her palm tighter against her wound. "You hesitated. That was enough." The words tasted like blood. He moved closer, the firelight warming the lines of his face. He knelt before her without command, without crown, just a man in the shadows. His hand reached for hers, pausing in the space between them. "Let me see." She pulled back instinctively, pressing herself into the stone wall. "I don't need you." His eyes narrowed, but not in anger. In something closer to pain. "You don't trust me." She met his gaze at last, her chest heaving. "I don't trust anyone." Silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the fire. And then, softly, he spoke again. "Then trust the fire." Her breath caught. He reached past her hand, his palm hovering just above the flame. The fire did not recoil. It grew, as though answering him, rising brighter, steadier. The light spilled across her face, painting her skin in molten silver. "I see you," he murmured, his voice rough. "All of you. Even the fire you fear." Her chest fractured. She wanted to shove him away, to scream that he was wrong, that she was nothing but ash and ruin. But the words died in her throat. Because for once, she was not met with fear. Not with revulsion. Not with curses whispered behind her back. He saw her. Her hands trembled. She lowered her gaze, unable to bear the weight of it. The firelight danced between them, a fragile bridge in the dark. His hand shifted closer. Their fingers brushed, the briefest touch, but it sent heat spiraling through her body, fiercer than any flame. Her breath hitched. Her lips parted. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath with her. She leaned forward. Their foreheads nearly touched. His eyes burned into hers, his breath warm against her skin. And then, just as quickly, she pulled back. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her voice shaking. The fire crackled louder, as if mocking her words. He did not chase her retreat. He simply watched, his expression unreadable, his silence heavier than any vow. And in that silence, she realized something terrifying. She did not want him to leave. The fire had burned low by dawn, its glow little more than a ghost against the cave walls. She sat curled against the stone, her body aching, her eyes raw from tears she had not meant to shed. Sleep had come and gone in broken fragments, haunted by visions of flame and shadows, of voices calling her cursed. And through it all, he had stayed. Silent. Watchful. A shadow at the edge of the firelight. She had almost convinced herself that silence meant safety. That maybe, just maybe, he was different. But hope was always the cruelest lie. The summons came at first light. The council demanded her presence. The Alpha King did not ask if she wanted to go. He only looked at her, his eyes unreadable, and said, "Come." Her stomach twisted. Every step toward the council hall felt like a march into execution. The hall was carved of stone, ancient and cold, lit by torches that flickered as though nervous of the shadows they revealed. The walls were lined with warriors, their armor gleaming, their faces set in disdain. At the center stood the council, old, powerful, unyielding. Their eyes fixed on her the moment she entered, sharp as blades. The air thickened with whispers. "Cursed. Why bring her here? She should not breathe our air." Her throat tightened, but she lifted her chin. She would not cower. Not here. Not again. The eldest counselor stepped forward, his voice booming through the chamber. "You stand among us, Fireblood. Do you deny what you are?" The crowd murmured, anticipation buzzing like hornets. Her lips parted. For once, she wanted to speak, to defend herself. But before she could, another voice cut through the air. It came from the shadows at the edge of the hall. A man stepped forward, one of the Alpha King's own guards. The one whose eyes had always lingered too long, whose suspicion had burned hotter than the others. His smile was sharp, triumphant. "She doesn't need to deny it," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "I've seen it. With my own eyes." He raised his hand, and in it gleamed something small. A shard of black stone, pulsing faintly. He hurled it to the ground. It cracked, and smoke spilled upward, twisting into an image. Her. Not as she was now, trembling and broken. But as fire. Her body lit with silver flame, her eyes glowing, her scream tearing the night as an entire den burned behind her. The crowd gasped. The chamber erupted. "Monster. She burned them alive. Banish her." Her heart stopped. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself upright, her chest heaving. "No," she rasped. "It wasn't." But the words drowned beneath the roar. The counselors shouted over one another, their voices a storm. "She cannot stay. She will doom us all. End her before it is too late." Her gaze snapped to him. The Alpha King. The one who had touched her wound, who had knelt before her at the altar, who had told her he saw her. His face was stone. For one agonizing moment, his eyes flickered, between her, and the council, and the sea of snarling faces. And he hesitated. The hesitation was worse than hatred. It was worse than rejection. It was proof that even he, the one who had promised nothing, could not stand against the world for her. Her chest fractured. Her breath came sharp, jagged. The fire inside her screamed, clawing against her ribs. She tried to hold it back, but the weight of their voices, their hatred, his silence, it was too much. The silver flame burst. It tore from her body in a violent rush, lighting the hall in blinding brilliance. The torches extinguished, swallowed by her fire. The air roared, the stone cracked, the crowd fell back in terror. Screams echoed as the roof trembled. The guards raised their blades, but none dared step forward. The fire licked their armor, their skin, and still she could not stop it. Her scream ripped through the chamber, raw and endless, shaking the walls. The fire twisted higher, until it spilled into the night sky through the open roof, painting the heavens with light. For one terrible moment, she was not cursed. She was divine. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the fire recoiled. She fell to her knees, her chest heaving, her body trembling. The hall was scorched, the faces around her wide with terror. The counselor pointed at her, his voice a thunderclap. "Banish her." The crowd took up the cry. "Banish her. Banish her." She turned one last time. The Alpha King stood among them, his eyes locked on hers. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched. She waited, desperate, foolish, for him to speak. To deny them. To claim her as he had in the forest. But he said nothing. The silence was her sentence. Her chest hollowed. Her breath came shallow. Slowly, she rose, her body shaking. She did not plead. She did not weep. She only whispered, so low only he could hear. "I will not burn for you." And then she turned, her cloak trailing flame, and walked from the hall. The crowd parted in silence, fear etched in their faces. None dared stop her. Outside, the night swallowed her whole. The air was sharp, the stars cold. She did not look back. Her heart was shattered, her destiny twisted, but one truth burned clearer than ever. She was alone. And she would never beg again. The night had not forgiven her exile. It waited until her body was raw, until her hope was gone, and then it split open with violence. The first scream carried across the valley like a broken horn. Then another. Then a chorus, until the air itself trembled with terror. She stopped in the snow, chest heaving, her cloak clinging damp against her back. The wind carried the scent before the sight, iron, thick and metallic. Blood. Fresh. The forest shifted. Shadows bled from the trees, but not ordinary shadows. They moved with teeth and claws, with hunger that was not natural. Wolves without flesh. Smoke-made beasts with eyes like burning coals, their bodies rippling in ways the world should not allow. The rival alphas had unleashed them. The screams rose higher, the packs fracturing in panic. Men and women fled into the storm, children pulled behind them, but the shadows ran faster. They devoured, not with jaws but with the suffocating weight of darkness, pulling flesh into smoke until nothing remained. She should have kept walking. She should have let them choke on their own fear, their own hatred. They had banished he. But her feet betrayed her. Her body turned back toward the valley, her pulse thrashing against her throat. She could not leave. Not because of them. But because of the fire inside her, roaring louder than ever. It demanded. Not to destroy. To answer. Her steps quickened. Then she was running, snow spraying at her heels, the storm clawing her hair across her face. The screams grew clearer. The smoke thickened. And through it all, one sound cut sharper than the rest, his voice. The Alpha King. It was not a cry of fear. It was command, harsh and unyielding, his presence still anchoring the chaos. But even his authority could not break the tide of shadow. She reached the ridge above the valley. Below, the gathering had shattered. Torches burned dim against the night, their flames nearly smothered by the crawling smoke. Warriors swung blades into nothing, their steel slicing only air. Each time the shadow struck, bodies fell. And at the center, surrounded, was him. The Alpha King, his cloak torn, his sword dripping with blood, his teeth bared in fury. He fought like the storm itself, but even he could not be everywhere at once. For every shadow he cut, two more rose. She gripped the stone at her side, her chest convulsing. Her pulse roared louder than the battle below. This was her choice. No one could make it for her. Not the council. Not him. Not the prophecy. Hers. Her hands trembled, fire crawling beneath her skin, clawing for release. She had spent her life burying it, suffocating it, fearing what it would do. But for the first time, she did not push it down. She opened. The fire answered. It erupted from her chest in a rush, tearing through her veins, her skin, her soul. Silver flame burst outward, shattering the storm, painting the valley in light so fierce the shadows recoiled. The snow beneath her feet melted in an instant, steam rising in waves. Her body lifted, weightless, the fire unfurling from her back. Not just flame now, wings. Vast, searing, silver wings that beat once, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. The wolves below froze, their smoky forms quivering, shrinking under her glow. Their growls turned to whimpers. Her eyes opened, glowing not with the reflection of fire but with its source. Lunar light poured from her gaze, silver and merciless. The pack stared upward, their screams silenced into awe. The council gaped, their judgment smothered beneath terror. And at the center, the Alpha King looked up at her, and for the first time even his face broke. His eyes widened, not in fear, but in something deeper. Recognition. She descended, her wings folding with grace and fury. The shadow surged again, but this time she did not hesitate. Her fire met them, silver against black, light devouring smoke. Each beast she struck dissolved in a hiss, shrieking before it vanished. The battle turned. Warriors rallied behind her flame, blades finding strength in her light. The Alpha King fought at her side now, not in front, not behind. Side by side. His blade cleaved, her fire burned, and together they cut through the tide. But the shadows were not leaderless. At the edge of the valley, the air thickened, darker than the rest. A figure emerged from the smoke, taller, broader, its eyes burning red instead of orange. It was no wolf. It was something older. A shaper of shadows. The rival alphas stood behind it, their faces twisted with triumphant fear, their hands marked with the runes of betrayal. They had summoned this thing, but now even they flinched under its presence. The creature's voice slithered across the field, not spoken but breathed into every ear. She is the flame that ends you. The words wrapped around her throat, dragging her back into the prophecy's weight. She staggered, her wings faltering for an instant. The Alpha King stepped closer, his shoulder brushing hers. His voice was low, steady. "Or the flame that saves us." Her chest tightened. His eyes burned into hers, not commanding, not demanding. Believing. And in that breath, she chose. Her wings flared wide. Her fire surged brighter, until the night itself fled. She was not curse. Not mistake. Not sacrifice. She was the bearer. The battle became fire. She hurled it into the creature, each strike burning through smoke, searing runes from stone. The rival alphas screamed as their own magic turned on them, fire searing their veins. The beast roared, striking back, its claws raking the earth, but her wings lifted her above its reach. She dove, silver fire trailing behind her like a comet, slamming into its chest. The valley shook, the mountain groaned, the air convulsed with light. When the smoke cleared, the creature was ash. The rival alphas lay broken, their power devoured. The silence that followed was absolute. She stood in the center of the valley, her wings folding slowly, her eyes still burning silver. The pack stared at her, their fear now tangled with reverence. The prophecy had twisted again. She was not the curse. She was the savior. And for the first time, she believed it. The valley lay in silence. The snow that had once been white was now scorched gray, melted into glass in places where her fire had struck. The air trembled with the memory of screams, though none rose now. Only steam rose, curling upward like ghosts unwilling to leave. She stood at the center of it all, wings still unfurled, silver light dripping from her feathers in slow embers. Her chest heaved, her skin slick with sweat, her body trembling under the weight of what she had unleashed. Around her, the packs gathered, not in formation, not in unity, but in uncertainty. Their eyes burned into her, wide with awe, wide with terror. No voice broke the silence. No one dared. The prophecy hung between them like smoke that would never clear. She will end us, or redeem us. Her own breath shook at the thought. She had felt it, the edge of control, the moment her fire wanted not just to destroy the shadow beasts but to consume everything. She had pulled it back at the last heartbeat, but what if she hadn't? What if next time she couldn't? She looked at her hands. The skin still glowed faintly, silver veins pulsing under her flesh. Beautiful. Terrifying. Hers. And then she lifted her gaze. The Alpha King stood across from her, his sword lowered, his chest rising hard and heavy with breath. His face was unreadable again, the way it had been in the council hall. But his eyes, those molten embers, refused to leave hers. They did not speak. They did not need to. In his silence, she felt the question that no one else dared voice. Was she salvation? Or fire incarnate? The crowd shifted. Whispers began to rise, hesitant, trembling. Some voices soft with reverence. Others sharp with fear. She saved us. She doomed us all. She is the flame. Her wings folded slowly, each movement deliberate, heavy with exhaustion. The fire dimmed, though it did not vanish. It never vanished. She wanted to speak, to explain, to demand that they see her not as prophecy but as flesh and blood. But her throat closed. She had no words left. No argument that could pierce centuries of fear. So she stood in silence, letting them see her as they wished. Savior. Curse. Both. The moon broke through the clouds then, casting silver across her face, across the ruin, across him. And for an instant, the world felt suspended, as though everything hinged not on the prophecy, not on the council, not even on the pacts, but on the choice in their hearts. Would they choose her? Or turn against her again? And deeper still, the question that reached beyond the valley, beyond the story. The question that pressed itself against the chest of every soul who watched, who listened, who bore witness to her fire. Would you have chosen her? Or feared her too? The silence deepened, almost unbearable. Her breath shuddered. Her wings twitched. Her fire pulsed one last time, silver against the night. And then, softer than a whisper, the world asked again. Is she salvation, or fire incarnate? The valley did not sleep that night. Even when the fires were doused and the bodies buried, even when the packs retreated into their tents, silence never truly returned. The earth still trembled with the echo of her flame, the air still crackled with the scent of smoke and fear. She stood alone at the ridge, wings folded tight against her back, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The moon bled silver over the mountains, indifferent to the ruin below. Her breath misted in the cold, shallow, and uneven, as though even air were coiled from her lungs. Behind her, she felt the weight of 100 stares. None dared approach. Not him, not the council, not even the children who had whispered her salvation. She was untouchable now. Not queen, not curse, but something in between. A line no one dared cross. The Alpha King's presence pressed against her still. She felt it, even when he kept his distance. His silence was heavier than words, his hesitation sharper than steel. She had stood beside him in battle, fire to his blade, and yet in the quiet after, he had stepped back. That silence carved deeper than any wound. The snow shifted under her feet. The mountain groaned. And somewhere in the distance, a sound rose. Not a wolf's howl. Not a cry of grief. A laugh. Low. Broken. Born of shadows. She froze, her chest seizing, her gaze snapping to the tree line. But the forest was still. Only the wind stirred the branches, only the storm whispered through the pines. Yet the echo remained, coiled around her ribs like a hand. Her fire stirred, restless. Her wings twitched. And then she heard it, words, soft as smoke, carried on the wind. She is not the only one. The world tilted. Her pulse thundered, her skin prickling with cold that no fire could melt. She searched the darkness, but the night revealed nothing. Only silence returned, heavy, suffocating. Yet the words lingered, etched into the marrow of her bones. Not the only one. Her breath shuddered. The prophecy had never spoken of another. And yet the truth had slipped through the cracks, undeniable. She was not alone in her curse. Not alone in her fire. Somewhere, in some corner of the world, another flame burned. And she knew, with a certainty that hollowed her chest, that when it rose, it would not burn as hers did. It would consume. The moonlight dimmed behind clouds. The valley sank into shadow once more. And as she turned from the ridge, cloak trailing sparks, one truth followed her into the dark. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. She is not the only one. The true Alpha hasn't risen, yet.